Hello and welcome to the Indian Cultural Forum. Today we have with us a major Hindi poet, Ashok Vajpeyi. Not just a poet, I should add. He's also been very much in the public realm, speaking up on issues of concern, not only to cultural practitioners, but all citizens. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashok. I thought before we talk about today, which is what we are all obsessed with right now in the midst of election season, that we would backtrack a bit and go back to 2015. I think a very fine moment for the writing community, when so many of you returned your state awards to protest, on the one hand, against the political murders of people like Kalburgi, but also the lynching of citizens like Akhlaque, who was lynched in Dadri. So shall we revisit that moment, because I think that's important to come back to today.
Well, some of us, quite independently and without being in dialogue or conversation with each other, did this. It was one of the most spontaneous movement ever. In fact, in my own case, it was a young writer who used to work in the Indian Express, gave me a ring telling me that Nayanthara Sehgal has decided to return her Sahitya Akademi award. Now, what is your comment? So I said, my comment is that I also join her. I also return, because I'm equally irked and agitated by what is happening. Now, that we were the first three. By the evening, there was a fourth Urdu writer who joined. Then, but in a short span,
It's almost as if there was something simmering, and this particular gesture spoke to such a range of writers who couldn't even actually speak to each other because of...
half of them I did not even know.
Exactly.
And they were in all kinds of languages. It was, mind you, it was important in another sense. One, that the writers, without being in some kind of an organized movement, spontaneously felt the way they did and acted the way they did. Also, all the events of murder of writers took place south of India's, in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, etc. And the initiative against that and to raise the voice came from North India. I think that was important, because all of a sudden the writing community across the country felt that we are one and that we can raise our voice for what it is worth. Also importantly, for the first time in the history, perhaps, of India's republic, the writers were on the first page. Absolutely. Without being dead. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes they get there because somebody had died and therefore he gets some kind of a small note, but otherwise. So for the first time, and the idea that intolerance can be resisted. Narendra Modi recently gave a 2-page interview to Times of India. In that, he mentions this award wapsi, and of course alleges that we were moved by some foreign...
The point is, even though there was all that whataboutery then, where were you when, etc., etc., as if they're not citizens, why don't they protest about whatever they're concerned about? But the fact is that whether it's the Prime Minister or Amit Shah or Arun Jaitley, they have actually expressed concern. They keep going back to it. Which is evidence of how important it was.
At that time, the day they accused us of having created some kind of a manufactured intolerance.
Manufactured dissent, they called it.
Luckily for us and unluckily for them, the President of India talked about intolerance. The Governor of the Reserve Bank talked about intolerance. And a major industrialist, Narayana Murthy, talked about intolerance. So, when I was confronted with this allegation, I said, well, if we have manufactured intolerance, are you also suggesting that the President of India, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, one of the top industrialists of the country, they are also part of the manufacturing intolerance? So it was, and the fact of the matter is that we were heard. Yes. Even the channels, whatever, I mean, we were attacked also, that's true. And some of us continue to be attacked for that. And we are called award of Vapsi gang and
exactly.
What it is. But what I think that moment created was that it is important that issues of wider significance should be addressed by writers once in a while as citizens.
Exactly.
And that role,
yes.
I think, seemed to have become all the more important today.
And it was also important because it led to, say, scientists, yes. Another group you don't
and
often
mind you,
hear.
500 scientists joined, and their statement started taking the cue from the lead taken by the writers. This has never happened before. Exactly. And mind you, unlike the writing community, the scientific community needs state support, financial grants, etc., much more than writers ever do. For them to join in was a this is for the first time that the creative and the scientific community were speaking in the same voice, which has never happened before.
Yes, and I recall one of the public meetings at that moment, which was so powerful, and there was such a critical mass of a range of people, Pratirudh, yes. In Delhi. And if you recall, there were writers from all languages, you had the media, you had all kinds of people with a range of ideologies except the right wing. So there was a moment when we felt, oh, we can, we usually sit and write in our rooms and hide, but we can also be in public space and make a difference through what we say.
One of the most touching moments was when Krishna Sopti, who was on wheelchair,
came, and the wheelchair was carried to the stage.
Carried to the stage and spoke. And mind you, from Krishna Sopti to Kanhaiya Kumar, yes. From writers from various languages, as you just now said, from southern languages, from northern languages, from Urdu, Punjabi, etc., and scientists, they all joined in. So I think it was a remarkable moment, and I think in the history of Indian creativity, if you like, post-independence, this was a historic moment. It is not for us to claim that, but facts do reveal, because that award Vapsi is still rattles powers that be.
It does, and I think it also, as far as we writers are concerned, it also gave us a sense of connection, which is not easy for us to partake of, without, say, one of the cultural institutions being involved. Suppose to round off the individual and the collective and what we have done and seen in the last few years and earlier. June, next month after the election results, this way or that, what would you suggest to individual writers, artists, filmmakers, but also institutions? What is a kind of action plan for us?
Well, I don't know whether I'm in a position to suggest an action plan. Action plan A.
A wish list.
Action plan A, if Modi forms the government, we are in for worst days, and individual writers and artists will have to find ways to express, to embody, and to disseminate their dissent.
We'll have to all take to allegory.
Yeah. Luckily, I know at least in Hindi, and it is the Hindi belt which is crucial. Recently, 2 appeals were issued. One against voting against forces of hatred, communalism, religious bigotry, etc., discrimination. It was signed by many writers from all over the country, and it included in a list of more than 200, at least 50 writers who are known. Another appeal was issued by supporters of Modi. The first appeal did not ask for whom to vote for.
Exactly.
It only said we
Vote
should
against hate
oppose
politics.
against
Yes.
hatred. The second one, openly and brazenly, listing out imaginary achievements of the Modi government, asked for, appeals for voting him back into power. Now that list contains 4 or 5 known writers of Hindi. Almost the rest of the list, which runs into 500, are people whom one has not heard of.
Plus, Ashok, several people have pointed out that they have not signed, it's not just the writers, but various statements that have come out.
Anyway,
They were just putting
I
in
mean,
there.
that apart. So you see what is happening. But what has happened, what I wanted to point out, that in the Hindi belt, this government has run berserk in many ways, harming cultural practices, damaging cultural institutions, etc. But from the writing community, hardly anyone has changed his side. This list, which was issued by them, had 4 or 5 people who are known BJP supporters. So there's nothing surprising.
It's an important way to read the
statements. Yeah. But the other list includes a large number of people who. Yes. So one thing which is reassuring is that whatever may happen, we have to keep our vigil. Nobody has appointed us keepers of conscience. But sometimes you have to assume as if it is your job to raise the voice of conscience. In fact, quite simply, I would say, a larger community of people who practice creativity, courage, and conscience, 3 C's, if you like, should emerge and should work both individually and, when required, in unison. We may be marginalized, our voices may be not heard or not responded to in the manner that we expect. But apart from the state, we are also addressing society. One, apart from the political formations, we are also addressing the large number of young people. And it would be a moral failure if we give up this role, whatever form of government. It is not as if a non-Modi government would although at least in the manifesto of the Congress party, there is some mention of cultural institutions and what they would like to do. But in the other one, there is no mention. But be that as it may, we have to be. I think it is perhaps undesirable. I don't know whether it is undesirable, but it is in any case unusual that the writing, creative, reflective community have to be adversaries of power. Yes. There is no other way. Yes. To retain the moral fiber and the human vision that literature and arts ultimately create.
Writers are only more important in times of siege. Thank you so much, Ashok. Thank you.